And good morning, everybody. We are live. Congratulations, you made it through the week. Another week of amazing food safety, food quality, awesome products that we all enjoy every day. And part of the challenge of working in food safety is that nobody notices, but Kara, Neil, and myself, we notice. And we want to say thank you. We appreciate all you do. If you're new to the chat, welcome. Pull up a chair. My name is Bryan Armentrout with the Food Leadership Group. And every Friday at 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Eastern, we live stream on LinkedIn and YouTube and have a chat around food safety. And if you're new, what you'll notice with this is this is not a lecture. This is a forum for sharing information and expertise. And that's what we love about doing this, because the participation of all the members who join us every week is absolutely fantastic. We really appreciate your input and also your time, because this is a valuable investment in what you're doing, and we really appreciate all of that. So today, guys, kind of a special thing. Let's see if I can get this to work here. This is episode 200. Yay! Episode 200.
Wow!
Believe this or not, isn't that crazy? So Kara and Neil, I've been doing this now. At the end of the month, my first episode was with Jose, and it was at Halloween. So gosh, 4 years ago. Crazy. It's been a lot of fun. All of the super cool people like you that I've met here as part of this, and the amazing group that we're putting together, like Larry, Tasia, Tim is, oh good, Tim's in Nashville. Awesome. So that's amazing. So yeah, this a lot of fun for sure. And part of the challenge, too much brain power. Yes, need more coffee. Absolutely. And part of the challenge with this too is there's always some technical difficulties, right? With it, we always get on about 10 minutes early to prepare everything. And Neil had some fun with his computer. Evidently, his IT guys at his company decided to change some computer settings on him, and so we figured it out. Joined by phone. It all worked out. And so are you back home now, Neil? Yeah, or I saw you were at a conference speaking earlier this week.
Yeah, so yeah, you can hear me, right?
Yep.
Gotcha.
Excellent. Yeah, so I was over with Kara at CSI for Chem Station, and had an awesome week working with the team, teaching and learning on some more sanitation practices with a bunch of individuals from all across the country. It was a blast.
Nice. I don't think there was good attendance too, from
exhausting.
What I saw.
Yes, very exhausting. And poor Kara, she took a lot of it on the shoulders. I mean, she took it and ran and did a phenomenal job. It was awesome.
Oh, thank you.
Very cool. Very cool. So of course, so Kara Mikkelson is with Chem Station, as you see here, and Neil is the principal scientist at Post Consumer Brands. And so if you're new to the chat, as Tim was referencing earlier, we have a all-star cast here today for sure. Austin's joining us, Alexis, and it's been an absolutely gorgeous fall here in Colorado. No snow yet. Usually by this time of year, we at least have a dusting or something. There's been some in the mountains, but this week has been in the mid 70s, and this morning we still haven't reached freezing yet, so which is pretty surprising. So it's been nice. How's the weather been for you guys?
Unseasonably warm. we don't have any snow yet either, and we were in Minneapolis this week, and the feedback was, before they were like, we can't have a conference in Minneapolis in October because it's going to be snowing. It was 80. So,
nice.
Well,
nice.
But it could have been snowing. In their defense, it could have been snowing. So
yeah. Well, I don't know which would have been better. They were spreading. The humidity was really low, and they were spreading manure out in the fields. All the crop fields, because they're done with their crops, and so because the humidity was so low, there was a nice smell over top the city from the farms. So, and then I get a call from my family. I'm trying to fly home. I'm actually stuck in Charlotte right now, but trying to fly home. I get a phone call from my family last night, and of course we're in Alabama, and my kids go, "Dad, it's hot in the house." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" They're like, "The air conditioner's not working." So,
oh jeez.
Oh.
So we're worried about air conditioner down there. You guys are probably worried about heat up there.
Yeah,
there you go.
we had the heat on.
So let's, I'm going to make you take another sip there, Neil. Let's join everybody here for our simultaneous sip here. Cheers. Very nice. I like your sticker on your mug. What did it say there, Carl?
Yeah, it says Women in Science. Oops, I gotta
get it to decide if it likes it or not.
Get it to the side. I'm going the wrong way. There we go.
Okay. There we are. Nice.
Women in Science. Cool. So it's my special little sticker I give to everybody. So.
All right. So, yep. Tim, you beat me to it. My family's from Iowa, and yeah, whenever you have that pleasant aroma coming from the farms, it smells like money. That was always the saying for sure. So, all right, brace yourselves, guys. Are you ready for the dad joke? The episode 200 dad joke?
Oh boy, that'd be good.
All right, here we go. Why can't you trust stairs?
No clue.
They are always up to something.
Gosh.
Oh my. I'm going to use that one.
Remember that, Neil, for the plane flight back home and torture whoever is sitting next to you on the plane.
Oh my.
That's almost like my recent one. I found it was like, why did the bacteria want to go back to school?
I don't know why. Why did the bacteria?
It wanted more culture.
But I'm
they're even better when they're science-based ones, aren't they?
Yeah.
So, gosh, we got a ton to go over here today. So let's kind of dive in here. So part of what I wanted to do here with our chat as we were preparing for this is something kind of practical, because it's always good, right? You talk about theoretical things and you talk about regulations and all these type of things, but the bread and butter of what we do in food safety and quality assurance really gets down to those day-to-day operations of how do you fix things. And I remember early in my career, my first quality manager job in a plant, and I was actually there filling in from somebody. So this corporate microbiology dude goes out to a plant in California, and it's a little cream cheese plant. And they had a coliform issue, right? Because this was all, chubs, your old-fashioned chubs of cream cheese, which are susceptible to coliform, right? Because you're all this handling and all these things that are potentially damaging the product. And we had a slight issue on some of the product. It was on hold. And I went to my first staff meeting, and the plant manager asked me, well, Bryan, what's the problem with coliforms? What's going on with that? And I'm like, and oh my goodness, did I get the dressing down? He let me know that was unacceptable in front of everybody under no uncertain terms. And I was just like, oh my goodness, I'm going to fail at my first quality manager job. I'm going to go back to corporate in shame. It's going to be terrible. Luckily, I had a fantastic regional quality manager. I told him about the incident. He said, tell you what, Bryan, I'll come down there and I'll teach you what you need to do. And he saved my butt. If it wasn't for him, I probably wouldn't be here in this career field today, because it would have been cut drastically short. So part of that, and this is kind of what we're getting into today, is the importance of a good investigation. And the key, and this has always been what I've found through my career, guys, is that if you have an issue like that sanitation is where you start. And all through my career, I would have a problem in the plant, foreign material or something that would pop up. The first call I would make, and I always hated doing this though, because it was the night shift, is you call the sanitation manager and you wake the poor guy up and you start drilling him with questions. And then hopefully you can get it over with quickly so that you can let him go back to sleep. But that was the place that you start. So today we're going to go over with sanitation how to do a sanitation investigation. So we'll be pulling from our background experiences relative to dairy and things like this too. But what we want to try and do with this is talk about this in terms of principles and what's a good way to tackle these things. And then hopefully avoid the dressing down like I received in my past, because that is still drilled into my brain. So with this, let's kind of start this at a high level, and Kara, we'll start with you. What is sanitation to you? What does sanitation mean if you were to define sanitation?
Well, I mean, like the strict sanitation definition, I would say, is cleaned and sanitized, right? You remove the soil from the equipment, from the environment, and then you apply the sanitizer. And in those steps, the 7 or 8 steps of sanitation, however you and that's the real basic generic, we can give a 3-hour talk on this, but that's the generic thing. And I think for me that, walking in after sanitation and seeing that it's clean, right? Yeah. No, and that's super, super basic. And you think that that's going to be easy, but it's not always easy, right? I don't know if that's what you were looking for with the definition, but that's kind of what I think, right? Mm-hmm. And I think too, and this is more philosophical, I guess, but with the sanitation employees, pride in ownership, right? Mm-hmm. Pride in their taking the sanitation seriously, and that the pride in your workmanship.
Mm-hmm. Anything to add to that, Neil, or does that make sense to you?
No, it makes absolute sense. So it's, sanitation is the backbone. It doesn't just get the condition of the facility to a microbiological acceptable level, but there's numerous other things it does. So I look at some of our facilities, because there's different styles of cleaning. There's wet clean, dry clean. In a dry cleaning plant, a lot of times you're not cleaning for micro. You're actually cleaning because there's other things that can happen. So look at a dryer. We know for a fact that we have to clean our dryers at least once a month, because fines build up on the inside of dryers. There's only so much you can do from an automated system, get all the fines out. And if you don't do it once a month, then there's a higher potential for a dryer fire. So, I mean, there's multiple reasons why we clean, not just microbiological. We really got to go back to the risks and look at what are the true risks for cleaning. Why are we shutting down to clean that process? And it's not always micro. So I want to make sure that people think about that when they're looking at, how often are we cleaning? Why are we cleaning in that process?
Well, and that's a good point, because it is also critically linked to PM, because as you're tearing this equipment apart, you're doing inspections of gaskets and parts that wear, and looking for metal on metal damage and Teflon. It's the front line, right? So that's how you're making sure in a lot of ways that foreign material is not getting into your product, to your point.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, somebody this week said, and maybe it was this week, I can't remember exactly, but they said, our day starts with sanitation. A lot of times people think, oh, it's the end, but really it's the start of the production, right? It's if you don't have it, you're not going to start. So right. You're not going to start up production.
Well, and you even think about it. I mean, so FDA understands this really well, is if you have a product issue and FDA comes in your facility to investigate, your sanitation is one of the first things they look at, because they want to make sure that those bookends of your CIP to CIP, your cleaning cycle, how long is that? How much product is involved? And rework. Are you adding any rework back into the product that's jumping over that clean break within your processes? So a big chunk of this, this is central to your risk management process within your plant, is what is that window? To your point, Neil, is it a day? Is it a week? What is that vulnerability associated with your product relative to all of these different threats, right? So allergens, chemical, physical, microbiological. Yep. If your sanitation fails, everything else falls apart.
Absolutely. And if you look at the recent notice from the FDA with the whole new reorg, one of their big things they're going to be going after is chemical contaminants. So we need to make sure that we're assessing all that in our operations, because they're going to be sampling. So when they're sampling for, we're used to them taking samples for micro, but now they're going to also be testing those samples for chemicals. So, and chemical can be quite a few different things, right? It's not what we think as like cleaning chemistry always, but there's a lot of other things under the chemical hazard list.
Interesting. And that's a good point, because right now FDA's in massive upheaval, right? As you know, programs and systems and organization that we've been used to for years, right? SIFSAN, right? All being reorganized. And so part of that during that period of time is how is it's all going to settle out, and what are those different focuses that they're going to be looking at. But it always comes back to, right, the top three things: allergens, chemical, physical contaminants, and then your Listeria and your Salmonella, right? Those three are always in the top three for recalls, and it all, again, circles around the sanitation piece of it. And part of this, and this is the voice of Jose again, kind of coming through me and saying, all right, set up the groundwork with these type of things. He's always amazing at that. And Kara, you had referenced this earlier, is you can't clean something that's dirty, right? So that first critical step of removing the soil is absolutely important, isn't it?
Absolutely. Right?
You can't sanitize dirt.
Neil's tagline.
But yeah, so you have to make sure that you're removing all the soils, and a lot of times physically getting in there and scrubbing stuff, right, and getting the brushes and all these type of things. And the other key part, because I think a lot of people forget, right, is with sanitation, it's not, you push the button on the panel and whiz bang, it does everything. No, that's not true, right? Even with fancy CIP circuit systems and things like this, everything still has to be set up correctly and managed. Both of you know very well, if your flow rates are wrong, if your spray ball's got a little bit of something stuck in one of those little nozzles that are shooting out inside your tank, and it's not hitting a section within there, you got trouble. If it's not sheeting correctly in the tanks, you've got trouble. Temperature, flow rate, chemical concentrations. Are you using the right chemicals? All of these type of things need to be checked. And that's just for the CIP piece of it. What about COP, right? Clean out of place. And a lot of times I go into plants, I'm sure you guys see this too. I'll look around in a production area and I'll look for COP tanks. It's like, okay, well, how are you hand cleaning things? Well, what do you mean? Oh, you're not hand cleaning things, right? There's things where you have to do that, aren't there?
Absolutely. And that's the hard part. We get a lot of data from CIP systems. If you have a newer CIP system, I've actually been in some plants where they still have switches and dials in their CIPs, but mass majority of CIP systems are ran by PLCs, so they're pulling data off there and collecting all this data. But then you get over to manual cleaning, and we lose sight of time, temperature, concentration, so on and so forth. And so there's a lot of new technology coming out, which is pretty exciting. I'm working with a couple companies right now on some new technology to start gathering data on that. So it's an exciting time. The last talk, Brian, we had AI. We discussed there's predictive analytics now, all this computer learning, and we are so good at developing data. I mean, plants pump out tons of data. You have preventative maintenance data, which directly affects your sanitation. You have your master sanitation schedule. Again, a massive amount of data that you're collecting and directly affects your daily sanitation. And then you go into everything from just even, did they start up and shut down on time? What caused these issues for them to lose time of production? So again, more data and getting into the predictive maintenance versus preventative maintenance. So there's mass loads of data out there that we have access to, but we're not using it. And the neat thing right now, with all this new stuff coming on board, we're going to finally have a chance to suck it all into these systems and allow computers to start analyzing this data and become predictive. And so then that way, I mean, we're doing a lot more with less, right? I mean, we've talked about it for years. And so we have to start going digital to support our directive, because we have to get away from thinking we're just producing food. The demand from the consumer is safety, number one, as we can see right now. Nobody wants to die or get sick from eating food, but we also want shelf life, extended shelf life. So companies are pushing the barriers to extend shelf life, and that may be some of the issues that we're seeing in the industry. I'm not saying for the Boar's Head or the McDonald's one that's going on right now, but there's a lot of other manufacturers out there really pushing the limits of what they can do to get proper shelf or get shelf life. So again, the data analysis and all this computer learning that's going to be coming out is super exciting.
Yeah, it is. It's so exciting. And you're talking about data. Our verification of sanitation, the environmental monitoring programs, that's a ton of data that enters into our process. And I'm been in this industry for a long time. I remember when people used to receive the COAs and just shove them in the drawer, right? I mean, we've come a long way, but there's still opportunity, right? And a lot of that data can help drive our sanitation practices. So.
Right. Well, and Cortland brings up a good point here, right? And I think we're seeing more and more of this in the food industry. It's coming from pharma and medical device and things like this. Your validation of your software, and as Tim is saying here, proper sanitation is critical. Absolutely. So I think, right, a lot of times you don't necessarily know this is true, but this is my theory around this. So if you have an issue and FDA comes into your facility, or even during a routine inspection, and they start, to your point, Neil, they start looking at this data and they start saying, okay, well, how do you know this data is correct? Have you validated this? Have you verified this? We want to see your calibration records on the RTDs. And if you start having problems in those areas, right. So if it gets to the point where FDA says, okay, this process is unstable and we're not sure if it's actually delivering, you need to recall, right? What do you do at that point, right? It's super important to have your data locked down and understood.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And you're seeing more of that. I mean, so we've had the FDA in every single one of our pet food plants recently. And one of the big questions was calibration. Yeah. When was the last time stuff was calibrated? Because it's exactly right back to your point, Brian. I mean, they're wanting to see that the data is validated, or you're extracting it from equipment that's being maintained properly.
Right. And so that verification piece, which is much more than just your chemical company saying, oh, okay, use this chemical at this concentration, at this temperature and flow rate, and then you're good. That's the beginning, isn't it, Kara? There's a lot more than that.
There's a lot more to it, absolutely. And ensure what looks good on paper isn't always the case in practice, right? Just because it's these parameters look good on paper, they've been done before, you've got to ensure that it actually, and in your environment, right? If it was done in a laboratory, that's one thing. In your environment, because it's different people, different products, different equipment, different location. I mean, Neil has examples of, you can put a plant in Wisconsin and a plant in New Mexico, have the exact same everything, and it could be completely different results. So making sure you do that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Neil.
No.
Yeah, because I mean, you look at the environment, right? So first off, you have extra stressors on your processing plant, especially out in New Mexico. You start looking at the controls over your HVAC system. Feeding in. Are you filtered properly and maintaining that filtration properly? Versus it's going to be, it's still critical in Wisconsin, but you're going to have a lot less stressors from that part. But it would be more seasonal in Wisconsin, whereas in out west in the desert, it's going to be more year round. Water, I mean, water quality is critical through the whole process, and everybody forgets that. And I just had a good lesson in life on that part again. It's looking at facilities where you're having some issues, and you start looking at all the water quality, and it's like we're using the same chemistries at a lot of different facilities, but yet there's a couple of facilities aren't reacting the same. Well, you go back and start looking at the water, and the water at the facilities where you're having issues is troublesome versus the other plants where you're not having issues. So it's all these different factors, and so you can't just have that cookie cutter program and try to think you're going to be successful across the board.
Right. Well, and part of this as well is we're talking a lot about the physical attributes of sanitation. People just as important, right? If you have a superstar sanitation manager, right, they're in there and they're making sure things happen. But a lot of times, sanitation is hard, right? It's hard work. You're wet. It's hot. It's sticky, whatever, and you have a lot of high turnover. And working third shift, as Kara had mentioned earlier, right, a lot of times sanitation is pushed off to third shift, which it shouldn't be. And people are like, okay, I'm going to find something during the day because I can't stay up all the time. So a lot of turnover. So your crews are constantly changing as well, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. But it comes from top down, really. I just read a good book called Extreme Ownership. It's the Navy SEALs. And one of the things that they talk about when they were going through the Navy SEAL training is they would split everybody up into groups, and then the groups would have missions they had to go out on, and they would have a group that would start falling behind. And so what they would do is they would take the group that was in first place and the group that was at the last place. They would flip-flop the leaders from those groups, and it was amazing how the first place group would start inching its way backwards to the last place, and the last place group would start moving its way back up to first place. And it was a study they did over and over again. And it proved immediately to the Navy SEALs that, it really started at the leadership, and that drove, that winning attitude, that proper culture to support their mission. And so if you don't have that proper culture and support at the top, you're going to fail.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, I think this kind of gets to what Tasia's saying here, right? Is, people trying to stay calm. And in the lessons associated with what we're talking about here today, they're looking to us for leadership in these areas. And one of the things I always would train my quality managers on is if there's any type of a crisis situation, people look to you. And if you panic, they panic. So you have to understand what needs to be done. And then to your point, Neil, lead to that objective and say, okay, we've got this. Here's the things that we need to do. We'll figure this out and we'll be fine. And once people understand that, they're like, okay, right. And I would imagine in those SEAL conversations, when they flip flop the leaders, it's the same type of messaging, right? It's like, hey guys, we got this. Let's do this.
Well, yeah, and it was really interesting to listen to what the guys and the teams would say. They're like, why are they taking our leader and putting them all the way down at the end and giving us the what they call the loser? So, and it's it was a really neat lesson from that, and really hit home on, just to your point, Brian, is the way we lead our teams, the way we prepare ourselves. We need to set back and have preparation to lead our teams. And so it's absolutely critical.
Yeah, and in sanitation, it's one of the most important areas because what I've found in the past, so your pre-op inspections are absolutely critical. And I always remember back to, I had a absolutely fantastic third shift quality supervisor who would work with the sanitation team at one of the plants from my past. And at the end of the night, part of her job then was to go around and do a pre-op inspection with the sanitation team. And she would then say, okay, well, take the plate off this pump. I want to swab inside. She would, really get in there and look at things. And she was fantastic in that when she found something that was good, all she had to do was she would just give them an approving nod, like, yeah, right. And then you could see the sanitation person who cleaned that piece of equipment. You could see that that pride
the
came
pride
through.
and ownership. Yeah. And I think I think a lot of times that can be the miss is the working together. You know, you have quality in one area and sanitation in another area. And if you keep them separated and if there isn't that communication, that's where the breakdowns can happen. And like you say, walking, a lot of times people don't know that they're doing the wrong thing because they don't know. They don't know what they don't know. And that's where, that education and working together and communication is so key and so critical to the whole process. And like Neil said, even top down, especially, head into the plant and take a look around. Even if you're, the vice president or the CEO, you should be in that plant and looking around and inspecting and understanding and understanding the culture.
Absolutely. And so here's an interesting question from Elena. There's fantastic conversations going on here, guys. Keep it up. Is third-party sanitation. We're seeing a lot of this, aren't we? Where you're hiring another company to come in and do your cleaning for you. Any thoughts around that, Kara?
Yeah, I mean, it can be good when it's good and bad when it's bad, right? And it's the same though internally or externally. And again, communication is the key to success, at least in my experience. And I know it can be some pain points. And we've seen good, bad, and ugly in both situations. But really that, again, the ownership and then the communication is critical to success if you're going to do that third party sanitation. But that also applies internally too. That applies internally, having that communication. So Neil, I don't know if you want to pipe in on that too.
Well, it's, there's nothing wrong with third party sanitation and going that direction. But again, it's a partnership. It's just like any other service, right? So you have multiple chemical companies out there. It comes down to your local service person who's servicing your account. I even look at it from at home right now, HVAC service. It comes down to I went through a couple different HVAC companies because I got poor service, and then I finally found one that have good service. And granted, they're not the cheapest, which is okay because when I call, they're there. So it's all about that partnership and the service level that you're going to get from those individuals is the critical part. So, and I want to go back real quick on that too. Kara, you mentioned training or alluded to training, and we do such a poor job in the industry and training. I mean, there's no other way I can put it. It's really irritating that we'll spend so much time training for production, but then when it comes to sanitation, it's here's a brush and run with it. And so, if we want to have the same success, and I'm actually trying to change the mindset and going through that mindset change right now with my current company, is we need to treat sanitation just like production. We're going to run it like production. Everybody's on board like it's still production. We have huddle meetings. We still have pass downs. We still, you do all the same thing, except for you're still doing production. You're not producing, and I'll say for my part, kibble. You're not producing a kibble, but you're producing a clean environment to produce the kibble. So you're still in a production mindset. So, but we've also had to step back and say, okay, well, you walk around these facilities, they'll have all these matrices showing up on computer screens. How well are we running? What's our downtime, ratio and all that. So why don't we have the same for sanitation? And so we're actually going back and recalibrating, okay, what is those matrices that we can show during sanitation to have that same mindset, or why are we behind? If a filler shuts down, you'll have a reason code for that. And so if we're behind in sanitation, there needs to be a reason code put in a computer for it so we can start tracking this stuff and getting better. So it's a whole cultural shift, but it starts at training. And the training, again, has to start at top down. I just was at a a meeting even with our CEO yesterday, and it was, the training has to start at the top and work its way down. We can't expect our plants to be successful if all those who are involved, and that also includes maintenance. Maintenance is going to training. So everybody's going to go through sanitation training because they all have an ownership of part of it, and it may not be a big part, but it's a part of it, and they have to know how to talk to each other. So it's a critical part of the process.
And you know how passionate I am about training and education, Neil and Bryan. And I can't agree even more, because I also think procurement, marketing, like let's get everyone on board with sanitation and food safety training, because it's just Tim said in the comments, it's your brand, right?
Yep.
And marketing is trying to promote our brand. But if they don't have the background in what we're doing, and not just production, but sanitation and food safety, it's hard to promote something that you don't understand. That's my opinion. Anyway.
No, absolutely. And so I'm going to build on that, Kara. So for these different groups, they need to understand their impact on food safety. So marketing, if marketing wants to launch a new product that happens to be an allergen, hey, we've just introduced a brand new allergen into one of our plants. What does that mean? Mm-hmm. So if we have to double our sanitation efforts and completely change around our systems, how much is that going to cost? And how does that compare to any eventual gains in sales? Is it worth it? Right? They're in their box. Mm-hmm. And my job in marketing is to come up with new products. Yes. And you're part of a company that produces those products, and everybody needs to understand what's going on. And I think a lot of times this is where companies get surprised, and then you'll have a recall that was unexpected because they pushed too hard in an area and they didn't understand those ramifications.
Well, and you look at procurement and those. So if you have a group of individuals that do your audits for your vendors, and they go out and audit your vendors, do they truly know what they're looking at? And so we're actually bringing all of our individuals that go out and do audits in the facilities into sanitation training. So that way they have better knowledge of what are they truly supposed to be looking for, with that mindset of almost like that pre-op inspection, Bryan. What tools do I need to take with me to really assess these facilities for, are they doing what they say they're doing, mindset.
Agreed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so part of this, right, is in our talk for today, we've been setting a lot of groundwork around this, but really it kind of comes back to this point where, let's say that we have an issue in the facility. And to my earlier example with the cream cheese, and you have coliform, and now all of a sudden everybody's breathing down your neck as the quality manager, and you're picking up the phone and you're talking with sanitation to figure out, okay, what happened? What did you find? Was there anything weird? And beginning your investigation. So I kind of wanted to walk through that process from your perspectives to see what's a good way to figure out what the heck is going on. Because, number one, the product is being produced for a reason and they want to ship it, right? And a lot of times the quality manager is the one person who's saying, nope, not going to ship. And everybody's breathing down their neck. So and
everybody hates them, right? At that moment, everybody's like, just step aside, please.
and so really, I think the first thing that you look at is, what type of failure do you have? Is it microbiological? Is it chemical? Is it physical? So let's say on the chemical side, a lot of people forget this, allergens are chemical. They're in that category. So all right, you did your sanitation and everything went fine, and you're having reports in the field of potential allergenic reactions, or someone found a piece of a gasket in product and sent it back to you, or there's product on hold like we were talking about for coliforms. You have to, that's step one is all right, what's my problem?
Yep.
And don't assume that it's just that one thing. You may have multiple issues sometimes, right? So to your point, Neil, with that consistency of your manufacturing process, let's say that during the sanitation shift the night before, there was a power outage and everything went down for a half hour. Right? And now the sanitation crew is scrambling to catch up because they only have X hours to get things done, and it keeps getting shorter and shorter. Yeah. maybe a corners got cut. Maybe something had to be done during that shift, and that's what happened, right? So figuring those things out and beginning your investigation there. On the physical side, one of the questions I would always ask is, so in your plants, it's really important to have on your return systems, strainers and other things like this to catch stuff, right? Because you need to find what's being rinsed down the drain. So if you're missing a piece of a gasket, did it end up in one of those strainers?
Right, right. Well, I think, at least for me, and Neil can pipe in too, but I think one of the first steps usually that I do or did and do is just get in the facility and watch. You can learn a lot by just standing for an hour or two and watching and talking to the employees too that are there. You find out a lot of things like, well, we didn't write this down because we weren't sure if we should or shouldn't, or, something like that. You can learn a lot just by being in the facility and watching.
Well, you're spot on. I mean, and that's so we've built a root cause analysis process in our for our facilities. And when a situation happens, the very first thing that happens, the very first bullet point is you get a team together, and it has to be departmental. It's not just sanitation. It's not just quality. It's everybody, maintenance. And they put a team together, and they immediately go out there and walk the line together and look at it. Because maintenance might all of a sudden remember, oh, we did some work over there, and, we forgot to tell you about that, or, so on and so forth, because that's never happened to anybody, right? So, or the operations is, hey, we had a failure over here, and the employee did this to quickly fix it and just to get through the run. Or so it's to get that immediate story and talk to the people on the floor and talk to as many people as you can and listen to them. But again, it's that multi-departmental approach. Immediately get into the plant, like Kara said.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you may find out from the maintenance manager that procurement switched them to a different gasket that was cheaper, and it's breaking apart. And oops, we got a problem.
And I think part of it too is you have to go in with an open mind. You can't go in with like, oh, I bet it's maintenance, or I bet it's that sanitation lead, or go in with an open mind, and really just make sure that you're not you don't have that narrow scope, because a lot of times what you think it isn't. So
super good point. Yeah, a lot of times we had this problem before and I know what it is.
Yep.
Yeah, that completely short circuit what you were talking about, Neil, with putting together that team and doing an investigation.
Right. Mm-hmm. No, it's that investigation is critical, and then you look at what do you do with the investigation. Because a lot of times you'll hear people you see on paperwork. I've done tons of auditing of facilities, and their immediate corrective action was cleaned and retrained. Cleaned and retrained. And I'm like, no.
Right. So what you did last time that didn't work is what you're going to do now.
Again.
And
again.
Yeah, exactly. Now, that's an immediate sign to me. You have a very low mature program. If your answer is always cleaned and retrained, and that really makes me start digging in deeper real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and along that side, you'll see this, and this is even worse. Is they look for blame. Oh yeah, that's this guy's fault. He didn't do whatever correctly. Oh.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Oh, you've just taught everybody else on your sanitation crew to cover up information and make sure that they don't get blamed.
Yep.
Exactly. And in reality, when you boil it all the way down to the bottom, doesn't everyone have a part of it? No matter what happened, there's ownership in the process. Right.
And it's not those tactical elements, to Neil's point earlier, which was really good and very important, is this is a system failure. This is a company failure. And so if you don't have support up through the senior leadership in the company, of course, you're going to fail. Is it going to happen today? Is it going to happen tomorrow? I don't know. It's going to happen at some point.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We all read with Boar's Head the article from the Sanitation Manager who was there, who said, yeah, I came in, I found a lot of problems. They didn't want to hear it.
It was crazy. I mean, I was just reading that article again this morning, and just to refresh my mind, and he was just even asking to get some chlorine in there.
Oh, jeez.
They definitely didn't even have the pure basics. But it's sad because they're not the only one that I've walked into like that. It's, you walk in these facilities and they're like, hey, we're having a microbiological issue, and you start walking around, and it's like the employees don't have the tooling to be successful. They haven't had the training to be successful. You're not supplying them with the right chemistry to be successful. So it's, at some point, when is it the employee's fault versus management's fault? And to your point previously, Brian, I think the mass majority of the time, I find my root causes tend to go back towards management. They haven't supported their teams properly. And so that's a critical failure for our industry.
Right. And at some point here, I'll put this article in the chat here so everybody can take it and read that. If you haven't read it, read it. Is that people are people, right? And so if you let your boss, your supervisor, whoever know that there's a problem and they don't react, after the first or second time, you stop, right? Because it's like, okay, I give up. I'll make the best of it that I can and hope for the best. And once that happens, you're in serious trouble.
Yep. Now, I feel really bad, for that situation there, because, that was clearly upper management making some poor decisions. And now because of that, you've got a whole town devastated, really good people who were hoping to retire, or whatever. And now everybody's lost their jobs in that town. And so now you've got another town that's been decimated because of some poor decisions at the top. So that's a rough one. I hate that.
And the damage to the brand is going to continue for a long
It's not just the brand, Brian. I was in a grocery store the other day and went back to the deli, just not to buy lunch meat, but I wanted to ask the deli personnel back there. I said, how busy have you guys been since this recall? And this one that I went to never even sold Boar's Head. They sold other products, but they said it's been quiet. Crickets. Nobody's coming back to buy deli meat. So it's not just Boar's Head. Again, and I say this all the time, sanitation and food safety is not proprietary,
right,
at all in this industry. If we're not all working together as one in food safety and sanitation, it's a failure to the consumer, because again, all we need is one issue. They're implicating the onions for McDonald's. So that's the vegetable industry again. So people keep looking at that industry. Now we've got the luncheon meat industry, and so the whole luncheon meat industry is going to suffer. We remember the spinach recalls. It wasn't just the one brand who suffered. All those brands were having to throw away all their spinach because nobody would buy it. So it affects everybody.
Well, that's a really good point, Neil, is in our minds over time, the company gets dropped and it just becomes the product. It's like, oh, spinach. Right? The one I harp on a lot, enoki mushrooms. Good God, don't eat them. Don't buy enoki mushrooms. But you could be the.
Well, those are good though.
Yeah, right? We see all these recalls, and the companies get dropped, and the product remains. And once you're in that position, it doesn't matter if you're world class. You're getting drugged down with everybody else, and it's like we say on here all the time: food safety, not a point of competition. Austin did a great job.
And neither is sanitation.
Yep. You can always track it back to four things: lack of knowledge, lack of skill, environmental factors, or cultural. Thank you, Austin.
And again, well, Austin, where does that stem from? You look at management. Exactly. Yep. It comes from top down.
So as we're doing our investigation here, one of the things that the quality manager always needs to make sure is everything on hold? Right? Because a lot of times maybe you didn't catch it all. And we talked about rework earlier. Maybe some of that product got reworked into something else. Catching all of that product and making sure when you're doing your investigation that everything is on hold and is in the warehouse is critical. And if the product is out in the marketplace, how do I get that back?
How do you get it back?
And so absolutely, this is how
that is, I guess that's the $1 million question, right? How do you get it all back? Because some of it's been consumed. I was actually part of a recall several years ago now, and one of our marketing people went into a local grocery store, and the recalled product was on discount on the end cap, and it's like the communication, once again, communication and the accountability, like someone said in the chat here, accountability.
Yeah, during the Bluebell ice cream recall for Listeria, people were buying recalled Bluebell ice cream on eBay.
Yep.
Craziness. So with this investigation, and so we'll take a look at this some more. We'll look at it from a microbiological standpoint. Is okay, my contamination and my product on hold. Now you start kind of gathering the data and talking with the sanitation team and getting all this information, and everybody on this team that Neil talked about is okay. Is my contamination sporadic or is it continuous? If you have a jump in your production run of micro at the beginning and then it kind of tails off, right, that's telling you some very important information. If you have micro that is through the entire run, that's telling you something else different. Another piece of it is the bacteria you're seeing all the same, right? Do you just have coliform or do you have other stuff that's in there as well? That's telling you something else as well, right? What do you guys think of that?
No, it's critical to understand that. So it's you start looking at trending, and so I go back to the days when I was a consultant and going in a lot of plants, and the first thing I would always ask them to do is send me their micro data. Because 9 times out of 10, their micro data actually said they were having a problem for a long time. Now, it can take some time for it to finally get to an acceptable, not acceptable, to a level where it starts showing itself more consistent on micro plates. But for the longest time, they had an issue. And then sometimes I go back and look at, are we even running the right tests to find the situation? I remember I was working with a cheese plant, and they said, Neil, the coliforms keep jumping around the plant, and they come and they disappear. They come and they disappear all around the plant. I'm like, okay, so let me go out there and walk around and walk the whole process. And I'm like, okay, so what type of tests are you running? And they were just doing fresh coliform. Well, you have to have a lot of coliform in your system to even get fresh coliform counts. I switched them over to a stress coli, which a test we use in the industry, and the coliform blew up everywhere. And they're like, oh my gosh, we've got a systemic issue. And I was like, yeah, now we got to go back and start looking at with the sampling program, break down the plant and start understanding, keep working our way backwards to where does this start? And then where it starts, get it corrected there. And then undoubtedly, especially in a cheese manufacturer, so much equipment and it's such a large process that it's going to be now harbored somewhere else. So we got to find the root source, get it fixed, and then keep the sampling program the same, and then keep working our way out to the finished product. So it's a lot of work sometimes, but
that's a really good point. And so to emphasize on that, and Kara, I'll get your comment here as well, but never forget, and this is critical, underline this, is negative results do not negate positive results, right? How many times have you guys fought that? It's like, oh, well, let's just retest and see if it's, no, it's fine now.
It's negative now. We're all good.
FCCA about that. Yeah. No.
Well, a negative result in normal situation only means that point in time was negative.
Yeah. For that same.
And then again, you go back to, is the test even sensitive enough to flush out? So in sanitation, it's a little different than, food safety from that perspective. When you're testing finished product, you're running, AOAC methods, ISO methods, you're using those types of methods. In sanitation, we're just trying to flush the bacteria out. We're trying to force it to show itself. And we need to make sure these tests are sensitive enough to push it out. Because if we can find it in the low levels and get it taken care of before it gets an opportunity to blow up, then we won't have the issues.
Exactly.
So I challenge people to go back and really take a look at and be. You don't have to follow AOAC methods and ISO methods for sanitation. I've done enhancement tests where enrichment tests. So I'll do enrichment tests. I'll do stress tests. All I'm trying to do is flush it out. I really don't care about the numbers in the beginning. I'm just trying to find out where's the root source of it so I can fix it. But you have to be able to flush it out first to find it.
Yeah.
Yep, I agree. And that's, I think, too, in this investigation, we talk about, okay, look at your data, but critically look at your data, right? It's not necessarily only just that environment, exactly but the lab test, what kind of broth was on your sponge? I mean, all the way down to that. What was the person that was trained that was taking the sample? There's so many different elements to the actual data that we receive that you need to take that critical look too, because I know that it all plays into it, and it does get overwhelming. It can be an overwhelming process, but
which is why, right? Yeah, it kind of gets back to what we were saying here at the beginning, which was pointed out with Tasia, which was, having that methodical, calm approach to this, right? It's like, okay, we have an issue. Everything goes on hold. We're going to make sure everything is on hold. We're going to begin an investigation with our team. We're also going to look at, to Neil's point, which I think was a fantastic point, which was...
I think Neil's frozen.
Is, what happened before? Were we seeing little indicators before, and now it's reached this point where it's critical. Now it's broken through. What did we find? And a lot of times, I always found, I'd be curious to get your guys' take on this as well. I would tend to approach microbiological holds and issues within a plant by going backwards through the process. I would start not at the warehouse, right? Because everything there, I'm assuming, is all packaged up and everything else, but work your way backwards and say, okay, packaging equipment, any issues there? All right, let's go back to the holding tanks. Any issues there? Right? If you jump around in the plant to different things, to your point earlier, Kara, oh well, yeah, we know what this is about. It's this piece of equipment. Well, maybe. Right? You have to be methodical in your approach
and systematic, right?
Yeah,
keep that.
Absolutely.
And are you getting enough samples to even understand? So let's go to a dairy plant where you have fillers, or any plant that has multiple fillers. It doesn't even have to be a dairy plant. Take a sample off of every single fill head off that filler and run that micro test on there. You might only find that you're having issues on 10% or 20%, or if it's all the fill heads, then your assumption is usually it's prior to the filler. So you keep working backwards, right?
Yeah.
But if it's only hit and miss fill heads, at least the product got to the filler clean in the first place. So now you can put all your resources just on that filler.
Yep.
And then if it is all positive there, typically I'll even jump all the way back in a dairy plant to the UHT or the HTST and take a sample off there and get an understanding of what's happening there, because now I'm bracketing the plant, right?
Yep.
And start looking at the bracketing of the process. Do you have, for fluid plants, quality true aseptic ports through, or for dry processing, do you have auto samplers put through the process? Or do you just start collecting samples through the process to break it down? Because we only have so many resources available on maintenance, on sanitation and all that, quality. So we have to do that bracketing process, because we can't take that shotgun approach, because then we never know what fixed it in the first place. And so that you have to do that very methodical. And sometimes people get irritated because it takes a little bit longer. But again, you're doing the legwork now to keep it from happening again in the future.
Exactly.
You're not just trying to blanket fix everything real quick, because then what do you do in the future? You're going to have to blanket fix everything again. So...
Yep. Narrowing the scope, right?
Absolutely.
Narrowing the scope.
So I don't think I've had a food safety chat go this fast before. We're out of time. And we have barely, scratched the surface. See what I did there? So closing thoughts, guys. What would you like to leave everybody on this very big topic here today?
Oh, my gosh. I'll let Neil go first.
Wow. I can't stress enough the training. Train. And when you do the investigations, get out there and talk to people. When I was a consultant, majority of the time, I got the answers from the employees on the floor. And they are the ones who told me what the issues were. And then I would investigate, trust but verify. But then I'd let them know, hey, appreciate it, great job. And commend them for what they do, because people like to be commended.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I want to leave with the thought that I appreciate Bryan holding these chats, because I think this is part of the process, getting people together to just chat and to learn experiences. We all have different experiences, and this is an awesome way. Again, food safety and sanitation, not a competitive advantage. Here we are. This is exactly it. So thank you, Bryan, because this chat is amazing. I've learned so much, and this is how we do it. So
well, thank you, Kara. I appreciate that. And really, I just kind of view myself as a facilitator in this, right? It is bringing experts on, and every week now I see the same names and I see the conversations that are taking place, and this is what we want, right? This is how 100%. We get better. Yep. Perfect. Well, with that, guys, we'll close out our chat for this week. Fantastic chat. Thank you to my experts, Kara and Neil. Greatly appreciated. Thank you, everybody, for the amazing commentary associated with our chat today. And definitely, we're going to have to bring this one up again and do more of a deep dive into a particular subset of this, so we can get a little bit more information than this for everybody as well. But fantastic. So everybody, of course, we will be back here next week at the same time, 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Eastern on LinkedIn and YouTube. And I'll have more amazing guests on the chat. Earlier, someone had mentioned, we need to get more operations and CEO people on. Yep, I'm working on that. I already have a CEO lined up for Q1. So we're bringing a CEO.
Oh, I can't wait.
Yep. That's going to be super cool. So enjoy your weekend. Have a great time. Know that you did an amazing job this week, and we appreciate everything that you do. So have a good one, everybody.